Well, good afternoon, Bonjour, Chumanam. Welcome, everybody, as we're slowly getting everybody to join on the screen with us today. I'm going to say thank you for joining us with our presenter for this afternoon, native chef Jason Champagne. We'll get started in just a few moments. I want to make sure everybody's audio and videos are working well. If you want to be on the screen so we can see your faces, you're welcome to leave your camera on. Please note that this is being recorded. So if you don't want to have your visual on, you're welcome to turn the camera off. We'd like everybody to stay muted unless you're asking a question. You know, you're welcome to unmute yourself or use the little reaction button, raise your hand so that you can be engaged with our presenter for today and ask questions and be a part of the conversation. And at the end, if you want to hold your questions to the end, you're welcome to. You're not required, but if you want to hold it till the end, know that we're going to leave some time at the end of our presentation so that we can have some dialogue and ask questions and understand better the concept of native nutrition and how we can apply that to our families, our communities, and those that we serve in our tribal areas. So we're going to go ahead and get started. It's a little after 1. Good afternoon and welcome, Bonjour. Thank you, everybody. Know that this is a recorded session as an opportunity for the National American Indian Alaska Native Prevention Technology Transfer Center to offer this session, this series for you all. I'm going to take some time to share some things on the screen, and I hope I get this correct. And if not, just let me know that I did it wrong. I'll be happy to fix some of the slides. We're not going to show a lot of slides, but we're going to have this conversation with our presenter today, and I'll share a few things at the beginning of our time together, and then I'll turn it over to him, and then he'll have the opportunity to share some information with you. And like I said, engage with each of you to pose your questions either in the chat or just ask them here on the screen with him. As I'm admitting just a few more folks into our session today. Thank you for bearing with us. So this afternoon, we are going to be speaking to the idea of native nutrition. Do you see the screen with the green slide?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Helps me understand I'm doing something right. Do you see the slide all together? Do you see the slide with the notes?
All together.
Okay, thank y'all. This is our 5th and final session for this series, Native Nutrition for Prevention and Healing. This is the Prevention Technology Transfer Center that oversees those of us who serve in the prevention science field with our tribal communities. And it's a good opportunity for us to collaborate together, although we're gathered virtually across the country. You can see that we are one of many centers. There are 12 centers across the country. We are the National American Indian Alaska Native Center, kind of in the center of this map where the yellow area is. So if you're wondering where we're at, we are housed at the University of Iowa, the College of Public Health, specifically the Native Center for Behavioral Health. So out of all these centers, all of these offices that get to serve across the country, we have the honor of serving our relatives in the lower 48 and Alaska. We are funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So keep in mind the content of this event is the creation of our presenter, and the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of SAMHSA, HHS, or our center. But it is important information, so we have a great expert here with us today. As a follow-up, please know that you will receive a link to this presentation slide, as well as other resources. And I'm going to share a few of them with you today and share about a larger product that we're going to be sending your way. And what's really helpful to us is if you can take time after today's event to please follow up with a survey. This evaluation helps us understand better how we can do better for future presentations. It helps us understand what you liked, what you learned, what was meaningful to you all. And it also lets our funders know that we're providing quality information to our communities. So you can do the survey in one of 2 ways. You can use the link that's here on the screen, or you can use the GIPRA code, the little QR code rather, that you see. If you have a fancy telephone, you can do it with that. I will put the little hyperlink in the chat box, so you'll have access to click on that and take the survey after today's event. So know that you'll have access to that. I'm trying to remember to admit everybody today. Bear with me. As I mentioned, we are gathered virtually today, but it is so important to take time to acknowledge the land and pay respect to Indigenous nations whose homelands were forcibly taken over and inhabited. Past and present, we want to honor the land itself and the people who've stewarded it throughout generations. This calls us to commit to forever learn how to be better stewards of these lands through action, advocacy, support, and education. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced occupation of Native American territories, and we respect the many diverse Indigenous people connected to this land on which we gather from time immemorial. While injustices are still being committed against our people on Turtle Island, today we say thank you to those that stand with us and acknowledge that land reparations must be made to allow healing for our people and to Mother Earth herself. This document was written by 3 of my former colleagues, Ella Driscoll, Keely Driscoll, and Mr. Sean Bear, all who are from the Meskwaki settlement, which is near our University of Iowa. So who's with us today? You can put your name and your community, where you serve, where you work, in the chat box. That'll be very helpful to us, so we can see who's joining us, because we usually have people from all over the country in our sessions, and Alaska, and as well as the lower 48. So please put who you are, where you're coming from in the chat box, so we can understand who we're on this journey with this afternoon. I'm Dr. Allison Bays, and I serve at the University of Iowa, the Native Center for Behavioral Health, specifically in our prevention center. It is really important to our community that we look for ways to heal with the issues that we face throughout time, as well as prevent that of which our young people, our children, our teenagers are facing in today's world. And so nutrition is very important as a part of that process. And I'll speak to that just a little bit, but I'm going to really let our expert speak to the importance of Native nutrition with his background that he has to offer from that perspective. I'm Tapilam Kowitekin from the South Texas area. My community is also known as the Mission Indian people. Back home, we have 2 children and 2 grandchildren, and it's really important to stay connected, even though we're so far away from them. I actually am up in Minnesota, surrounded by the beautiful area of Red Lake Nation, Leech Lake community, and White Earth. So we have a lot of great relatives up here, but I'm always missing my family back home too. It's always good to be back and celebrate. But in the meantime, I get to journey with each of you today. We actually have someone from my area, from the Minnesota area. Our presenter is Jason Champagne. He is from the Red Lake Nation. He resides in Baldwin, Kansas, and he's had a long-standing interest in food and nutrition. After he was going through his high school years, he decided to work in construction so he could save money to actually go to culinary school, not just any culinary school, Le Cordon Bleu. And upon graduation, he had the privilege of working for an international company in Florida for several years. And he was very successful with his job, and he focused on that wonderful opportunity in the culinary world. But he also wanted to do something more. So he went back to school, the University of North Dakota, and graduated with a degree in community nutrition and Native American studies. He's an MPH, a master's in public health, and he's worked with tribal communities in public health nutrition. As a Native chef, he focuses on helping our people, helping our relatives across Indian country lead healthier lives, looking at traditional foods as well as contemporary food styles. So in a few moments, I am going to turn it over to him, but just so you have an idea of what we're going to cover between he and I together today, and some of the information I'll share with you at the end of our session, we'll have the opportunity to connect between our diet and disease with general nutrition recommendations, because we know it's important to have good health, to have important ways to think about what we ingest, what we put into our bodies, to continue to have sustainable lives, to have good health and good journeys. In addition to that, we are going to look at native nutrition. Because we are always learning about and listening to the dialogue with mainstream society that things need to be evidence-based, we know that's important. We know there's validity to it, but I want us to turn the table and look at our own practice-based evidence. Look at what has worked for us in our communities to actually divert diabetes, obesity, heart disease. All the issues that are here on the screen are things that we are susceptible to because of our heritage, because of our genetics, but it wasn't always the case. And so I want us to think about this. When we look at native nutrition, what is important to our communities? We know that we can look at our ancestral foods as medicine. It has been done for hundreds of years, and things changed somewhere along the way. And I'll show you a few examples of how they changed or what changed to divert us from healthy living. And as I said, you're welcome to ask questions in the chat box. Besides putting who you are, where you come from, you're welcome to put questions in the chat box or raise your hand, unmute yourself, and engage with our presenter, our native chef, Jason Champagne. We know that our diets have been impacted greatly by colonization. Our health has been impacted by colonization. Some are very prevalent, some that we see immediately, and some are kind of subverse. We know that disease was brought over by our colonizers. We know that alcoholism was brought over by our colonizers. And we know that because of commodities that we were given, our health has been impacted. These three visuals give you a quick glimpse into some of the impacts of our health in a negative way, because we know we didn't have a lot of the diseases that were brought
up there. I don't think you can sit on the couch.
Because of commodities. We learned to make fry bread. And although a lot of non-natives think that that is traditional food, you and I know that it is not, and how unhealthy it can be when you have the large portion for your Indian taco. I'm not saying you can't enjoy it, because from time to time, moderation is okay, but it's important to know that it's not something that is traditional to us. And we know near many of our reservations, this last image on the far left, there are a lot of non-native communities who have stores that are close to our native lands, to our ancestral lands, to our reservations, our tribal communities that are selling alcohol to our people. And so these are not things that we created or that we have wanted in our communities, but yet they are a part of that. And with that, I do want to turn it over to our presenter, Chef Jason, so that he can share the important ways that we can learn to lead healthier lives.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Allison. I so much appreciate you inviting me to talk today. And hello to everybody who's attending. I sure appreciate it. And I hope you're having a great day. I'm coming from Eudora, Kansas. It's a really nice day today. So just so happy to be here and talk. Thank you, Allison, for covering my background. I have an MPH in public health nutrition and a culinary degree, and was a chef for Disney World for 3 years. And you just got a lot of education in my background, and I work with a lot of Native communities. I'm not a traditional Native American. I grew up in an all-white society of 498 white kids and 2 natives. So I kind of think I'm a man of 2 worlds. I'm Native American, but I also grew up in a different way. But as I get older, I'm getting more connected to my heritage, being around other natives, and it's just a great journey in life to be able to learn more about myself as I get older, how spiritual Native Americans are, how powerful people we are. So, I'd like to start to talk about, we have an epidemic of obesity among Native Americans, an epidemic of diabetes, a lot of hypertension, a lot of alcoholism, a lot of drug use, substance abuses, and a lot of depression and a lot of suicide going on. So if you look right now, I mean, it's really tough in some of these communities. There's a lot of poverty, and it's just it's sad to see some of it, and it really is. But kind of got to look at why that happened, and Allison kind of touched on that. What happened to our people? If you look prior to colonization, and you probably heard this before, look at the pictures. All the Native Americans were all lean. They were all fit. They stood straight up. They were hunters, and the women were mostly gatherers. And so there was a lot of exercise, right? There was a lot of, going out and getting our food, and we didn't have money back then. Native Americans were land rich. We were rich because we were part of Mother Earth. And, a rich Native American back then was one who shared and gave, and family was like gold now to everybody. Family was so important. So colonization came, took us away from what we used to do. Native Americans are giving people, so they gave the land, they shared the land, and it kind of backfired where they just kept taking more and more. Subsequently, Native Americans ended up on reservations, and that wasn't the best thing, because the land was being taken away from them. That Mother Earth, we feel like Mother Earth, we're part of it, and when we die, we just go back to Mother Earth. And so what happened was, that we were put on reservations, and obviously I don't know if you ever heard the term historical trauma, but I think that still continues to this day in genetics with a lot of us. Native Americans were forced to be on reservations, and then I'm not going to go into all the details, but eventually they had to basically survive. And they had water, they had lard, and they had flour. So they created fry bread, and they out of necessity to survive. And a lot of Native communities, you'll see that they eat fry bread a lot. And if you ask yourself why is that, I think it's more of a comfort food. I think they just feel good eating it, but that could be possibly because it helped save Native Americans' lives when they didn't have any food. But now it's backfiring on us with the obesity and the diabetes. I mean, I'm diabetic, and I really try to watch what I eat. And if I work out like crazy, and I try to eat good, but still my diabetes is right on the border of I'm on the minimal medication. So for some of us, it's really tough. But learning the carb count in fry bread is important. Teaching our people how to use culinary. I'm a big believer that learning how to use a knife will help people cook more at home. And a lot of these Native Americans, they live on commodities now. They're in impoverished areas, and they have to eat what they have. So they get commodities, the food deserts where they don't have really access to healthy vegetables, healthy fruits. So they're kind of just getting by with what they can. And as a health professional, I think we really need to understand that we just can't jump in and tell them not to eat fry bread anymore. We just can't tell them go buy some fresh fruit and some fresh vegetables because they might not have access to. I'm the type of professional that I believe in, walking in someone's shoes before we judge them. And so with my background with culinary arts, and I own a business called Native Chef LLC, what I'm trying to do is introduce, how to understand the carb counts with the food that they have. If they have commodities, understand how many carbs are in certain portions, understand portion control, understand plating and colors. And so I talked a little bit about historical trauma. And I know that has a lot to do with the depression, with the issues that we're facing, because personally, I have some issues like with anger that just come out of nowhere. And I don't know why. I could be having a great day, and then all of a sudden I just get this anger that comes out, this angry feeling. And I just believe that it's genetics. I believe that my ancestors went through that historical trauma, and some of it carries over through genetics. So there's a lot of depression. You know, the land was taken away from us. I just presented at a conference. I did some food at a conference in Nebraska last night, and this wonderful Native American female elder got up there and was talking for 20 minutes, but she really touched me because she was talking about how she said, give us the land back and we will make everything better. She was angry. She was upset because of all the climate changes and the issues we're facing with Mother Earth right now. And it really hurt her because she was almost in tears, but she was saying, give us the land back and we'll make it better. And so right there, that's just a perfect example of the hurt, even with the global, the climate change and all that, the damage that we're doing to Mother Earth, we're doing to Native Americans as well. Because not too long ago, we were, living all on Mother Earth with everything we needed. So, as I said, kind of like looking at helping them understand, educate them with diabetes, with obesity, with calorie count, with cooking. My business, I try to teach. That's what I do. I try to educate with my Le Cordon Bleu degree and my MPH. I try to teach people to help them learn how to use a knife so that they spend less time in the kitchen, learning proper knife cuts, learning how to use colors if they have them available, and just utilize foods. And then traditional foods are so important to Native Americans. A lot of them still use fry bread as traditional, although it wasn't traditional. It was something that kept us alive when we needed to eat, but they like to eat a lot of, buffalo if they can, and then that's too expensive, venison, but that's hard to get. And so now they're, because it's a food desert now, they have access to like a grocery store sometimes where it's like a dollar for a corn dog, And so a lot of these communities are, suffering with just not having access to the food. And so basically, we kind of ask ourselves, what do we do about it? And like I said, I'm just a big believer that educating them with the culinary arts part and educating them on learning how to cook. And a personal story of mine, I was told that I was going to die back in 2015. I had 4 years to live. And it was because I weighed about 300 pounds. I had an A1C of 11.8. My cholesterol was off the charts. My triglycerides were off the charts. I was a severe alcoholic. And I almost died. And I had the doctors tell me, you're going to be gone in 4 years. And I hope nobody watching ever has to have anybody tell them that they have so long to live. But it really got me where, I started, I quit drinking 5 days after that, sober 7 years, just coming July 12th. But I started eating more whole foods because I have a background in dietetics. I didn't finish the dietitian part, but I finished like half my rotation hours, and I did all the medical nutrition therapy classes and all that. So I kind of thought to myself, how can I help heal myself? And so what I did was I started eating more whole foods and more lean meats, and started walking and started exercising. And that led to my numbers drastically dropping, where I was taking 13 medications. And then 2 years later, I went off every one of them. And the doctor was asking me, well, what are you doing? Because you tell me what you're doing, because I have to share this information with others, because I only seen this happen with 1 in 1,000 people did what you did. And I told him exactly what I did. I quit drinking alcohol. I started drinking water like my life depended on it. And I started cooking more whole foods. And so then I started thinking, when I opened my business, Native Chef LLC, back in 2017, I started thinking that, maybe I can make an impact with my business and help other Native communities. I can go in there and I can tell them my story. I can share with them, how it feels to be a severe alcoholic, and how it feels to almost have a stroke with diabetes, and how it feels to have cholesterol The doctor told me my blood looked like it was cream of mushroom soup. That's how much fat was in it. But so I started thinking to myself, well, how can I help with my business? And so basically, that's what I teach is using whole foods. And I started thinking to myself, how did our Native American people eat prior to colonization? It's pretty similar to how I was eating when I went off all those medications and lost 50 pounds. A lot of vegetables, a little bit of fruit, a lot of berries, lean meats, lean chicken, lean pork, lean turkey. Just like the Native Americans, they ate a lot of lean buffalo and a lot of plants. And they didn't have processed foods, and they didn't have, flour and all that stuff. So they were eating very, very, very healthy. So if we can try to, people ask me, what type of diet were you on? And I said, I wasn't on a diet. I just kind of used my education to think to myself, what would help me heal? And it was the vegetables, and it was the cooking, and it was the the whole foods, and none of this processed stuff that we're always eating. And so then I started promoting this type of indigenous diet, and that's what I teach. I just basically tell them, use the base of the plate as the vegetables, put all the vegetables on the bottom of the plate, and then top it with the lean meat, the lean turkey, or and then another example with diabetes, and fry bread. I know fry bread has a huge impact with diabetes. And it might just be me, but once every 2 or 3 months, my mom will cook fry bread, and I'll have usually we have Indian tacos. I have 2 pieces in the evening for the supper. And then I usually have 2 pieces the next morning. And my favorite things to eat breakfast, with eggs and potatoes and fry bread. That's my favorite meal, but it's only once every 2 or 3 months. And what I noticed every time I do that is I check my glucose, and it's elevated, obviously, after the first and second meal. But what I noticed was when I checked it again that evening, and then the next day, like the next day after the breakfast, it was still elevated. It wasn't coming down. So that kind of got to me, like, wow, my glucose is elevated. I only had 2 pieces, in the morning. So, and it remained elevated for about 2 days. So I started thinking to myself, if that's the case with me, imagine some of these communities where these Native Americans are eating 3 times a week, maybe 4 times a week. But the issue is we can't just walk in there and tell them not to, because a lot of these communities, they're in poverty. A lot of them it's very cheap. It's very inexpensive to make a batch of fry bread. And they have family. They have a lot of family on the reservation that might come over. Grandma's making fry bread. Everybody come over, and it's a feel good thing. Everybody's together. Everybody's eating fry bread. Family's so important. And then I talked about how the fry bread could be genetically in us with a comfort feeling, because that's what saved us. That's what saved our life. But so it's important that we just don't walk in and tell them not to eat it anymore, because that might be the only food that they have. But I like the slide that Allison provided that showed the information about the calories. That's what we can start doing. We can start introducing, documents that show the calorie size, how thick it is, how round it is, how many calories is in it. But I'd like to go a step further. I'd like to go to how much carbohydrate is in each one of those pieces, a 4-inch, a 6-inch, a 8-inch, a 10-inch, and bringing that information to the communities to let them know we're not telling you not to eat fry bread. We're just showing you that if you eat a piece this big, you're ingesting this many carbs and this many calories. And if you're borderline diabetic, or if you are diabetic, understanding how that's going to impact our glucose levels, and just bringing information into the communities and talking with them about that. Another important thing with working with these Native communities, it's really what I've noticed in my background and history with working with them, is that it's tough for some of them to listen to a non-Native American. A lot of them are very, very hesitant to do that. And so myself, I'm a motivational speaker. So I go to a lot of places and I speak to a lot of kids and a lot of adults and a lot of elders and Native communities. And I try to inspire, the younger generation to understand that our the future of our nutrition, the future of our people really depends on them going to get that education, getting that nutrition education and public health and nutrition and dietetics and mental health and getting that information and then coming back to their communities and taking over those leadership positions and that would really help. And mental health is such a huge issue with our people. When I was about died, my mental health was bad. I didn't care about anything. I know how it feels to almost die from being an alcoholic. And a lot of people, I've had family members, I've had two cousins that have passed away. I've had two friends from Haskell that I graduated passed away from alcoholism. I've had one good friend from high school pass away that was 5 years younger than me. And he passed away from alcoholism. And you sit there and you kind of ask yourself, like, especially this other person, good looking guy. I thought he had everything going for him. We weren't close for the last 5 years. And I didn't know what was going on until I heard that he passed away. And you wonder, and you always sit there and wonder why would that person do that? They had, from the outside, they looked like everything was okay. So I know that feeling. To let you know how that is, being a severe alcoholic where you're about to die, you don't really think about the future. Your mental health is not stable enough to think about the people you're going to hurt. Your parents are going to be missing you for so many years, your family, your friends, you're going to hurt a bunch of people if you leave this earth. But being in that situation, you kind of don't think about that stuff. You're in such pain and such hurt that all you're thinking about is just that night, making everything okay. You're not thinking about next week or next month or next year. All you're thinking about is making everything okay now. And towards the end there, before I quit, my pancreas on my left side was killing me. And I knew something was wrong. I had a master's degree. That's the problem, is I received a master's degree as a severe alcoholic, and I knew something was wrong, but still I just kept drinking. I was drinking it away and making everything okay. And that's the problem is if you're not stable with your mental health, then everything else kind of deteriorates around that, the eating, the depression and the substance abuse and all that. So everything kind of trickled down from that. And, finally, when I quit drinking and started understanding what I was doing, my mental health, my started getting better and better and better. And now I feel so thankful. So thankful to be here every day. Every day I wake up now and I'm just happy to see the sun come up, because I feel like now I'm on borrowed time. I feel like I should have been gone, 2019, 2020. So every day now is just a day to just try to help people. And that's what I do with my business. I try to go to these places and talk to people who were in the position that I was and identify with them and let them know, listen, I understand how you feel because I was there, but there's a way out of it. If you really want to get better, you really have to, put some effort into it. And I had an elder tell me one time, pretty powerful elder that was speaking up there. I went to talk to him right before I quit drinking. And I asked him, I was really bad. I was shaking at that time. It's probably about 4 months before I quit, just shaking because it was like 7 p.m. and I didn't have my alcohol in me. And I was really bad. And I was at this conference and I asked him for help. because at the time he was speaking, he said he was 27 years sober. And I started doing the math. And he told us his age, and then he said he's 20 years sober. And I started thinking to myself, that's my age right now when he quit. So I went up to ask him. I said, how did you quit? How did you? And I wouldn't look him in the eye. I wasn't, I was just out of it. I was so out that, alcohol withdrawal. And he said, stop. He said, first of all, look me in the eye. And I looked at him and I was asking him, what medicine do you take? You got to tell me, because I think something's going to happen to me. He said, all the medicine you need is right here. That's what he told me. He pointed right at my heart and he said, all the medicine you're ever going to need is right there. And I'll never forget that. I wish I remembered his name. I wish I could talk to him today and tell him how good things are going and right now, but he helped me. He almost like believed in me. He looked me right in the eye and he said, you have it in you. And all these Native communities have it within them when they're, doing the substance abuse and the mental health issues. All the medicine is within us. We just have to kind of understand and have some of us health professionals help them understand that, we can make a difference in these communities. And so that's kind of what I do with my business. I just try to promote health and wellness. I try to use culinary arts. I try to use motivational speaking. I try to reach the kids at 5 years old. I work with a lot of 5-year-old kids, getting them hands-on food cooking. So many kids have had their first experience cooking with me. And I take that for granted, and I wish I didn't, because that's powerful. Some of these kids, working with them, that might lead them to maybe a culinary career, maybe a health career, maybe just cooking more at home, maybe bringing that information home to their families and bringing recipes home that I send to them. But trying to make that small impact in these communities, trying to teach them about culinary arts, about diet, about portion control, about using colors, creating art with food. Kids are very adept to that. So, I'm just one person. I'm just one person trying to make a difference. But I think all of us together, I think we can really make a difference, because we need to. We really need to. There's a huge issue going on right now. And is there any questions out there?
I know one of the ones I just read from, I believe Marianne, was talking about healthier alternatives for fry bread. Do you have healthier options or suggestions?
I make a bannock bread. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of bannock bread, but it's basically flour. It's like a biscuit bread. It's oven baked. And so when I go present and I do food and I do catering, I don't do fry bread. I used to do fry bread. I used to be the chef for the Shakopee Madewa Canton Sioux community. They're the second wealthiest tribe in the United States. And I used to go teach them how to cook up in Minneapolis, and they always wanted fry bread. So I did fry bread for them, but I got to a point where I was a wellness chef. That's what they hired me to be, as a wellness chef. And I started thinking to myself, I don't think I'm doing my job by making fry bread. So I started teaching them how to make bannock bread or cowboy bread or skillet bread, something like that, where it's just not deep fried. We're still getting the carbs from it, but at least it's not deep fried, right? At least we're saving a little bit of calories there and a little bit of fat there. But teaching them how to make a bannock bread and then learning how to cut it thinner and understanding the portion controls. A lot of these communities and a lot of these people I work with, I try to teach them, you have so many carbs that you ingest in a day. So like what I do is I try to, if I'm going to have bread, I'll only have it one time. I'm not going to have it for breakfast. I'm not going to have it for supper. I'm going to have it usually for an evening snack. I'll have like a ham sandwich or something. That's going to be my bread intake. Or if I had breakfast with bread, I'm not going to have bread for dinner or my evening snack. So it's more teaching them, we're not telling them to give up bread, period, because they might love bread. We're just telling them to use it minimally and try to use it at a different at a different time, at a different meal. And it actually helps you look forward to it more. But yeah, a skillet bread, bannock bread, it's a northern thing. My dad's from the Red Lake Mountain of Chippewa, Red Lake Band of Chippewa, or no, sorry. My dad's from the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa in Minnesota, in North Dakota, right by the Canadian border. That's how my last name Champagne came out. And so basically, they do a lot of bannock bread up there.
Trying to unmute myself. Another question that came in is when someone notices that a lot of the children have tooth decay, how do you think this is impacted by their diets? Is it related to their food intake?
Well, more than likely, that probably has to do with a lot of sweets. What I've found working in these Native communities is they love their pot. They love their, Coke, Pepsi, probably a lot of sweets in the house. I had a cousin that was 19, a first cousin, 19 years old, and her diabetes got so bad that she had to have her part of her leg amputated. And that's just, I mean, that was just, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it, but I don't live up there, but a lot of these natives, they use a lot of sugar in their fry bread, like way too much sugar, where it's just like too sweet for me to even touch it, but I think that might have to do with a lot of candy available, a lot of sweets around the house, a lot of processed sweets available. Again, though, a lot of that stuff's inexpensive. A lot of in the poverty areas, that stuff's inexpensive. They can get it cheap, and it's at least they have something to eat again. But again, we have to teach them. That'd be a perfect example of teaching them, if you eat too much of this, it could lead to tooth decay, and show them pictures of kids who had tooth decay. Bring awareness of that to where you don't want your kids to get to this point. If they continue to drink this soda, and if they continue to eat these sweets the way they do, and this could happen. And I think that would be a good awareness, to actually visually see, cases where the tooth decay happened to these kids, and that'd be a good prevention tool, I believe. So
Yeah, one of my experiences, Jason, if I can share for a moment, is as a former K through 12 educator, working in with tribal communities, a lot of children have to incentivize programs. And so I would do that often with the little ones. And their go-to was they wanted something, a sweet treat for the reward. And I flipped it on them. And yes, I gave them a sweet treat, but it was a natural sweet. So when I would give them options of what they could choose from, they were expecting some kind of candy or cookie or cake. Someone mentioned Little Debbie's here in the chat box. Like that's what they were used to. And so in lieu of that, I would present fruit. Or if I took them to a store with their family where they could choose their own prize, I would tell them this is the only side of the store that you could go into, was where the fresh produce and fruit was. They couldn't walk up and down the chip aisle, the pop aisle, the candy aisle. Those are if they went to the fruit or the produce, I would buy them what they wanted. But if they went to the other areas, I wouldn't buy it for them. And they were surprised, as was I, because I know some of the children were very willing to buy, not just for themselves. I remember one little boy in particular wanted some strawberries, and there were two sizes to choose from. I thought I was just buying for one child. And then he bought the big container of strawberries. I was like, wow, okay. You're only one kid. And I said, gosh, that's a really big thing. Are you going to finish that? He says, I'm buying for my family at home. So I paid for the items for him, but he was thinking not just about himself. He was thinking he could take this big package of strawberries home to share with his family, which I thought was a great idea. So giving them ideas.
I work with a tribe up here in Kansas, and I go work with kids at the Boys and Girls Club at the Kickapoo a lot. And what I found is, I usually do 2 cooking activities. One of them where they're actually cooking, another one where they're plating. For example, I'd set up pineapple, cantaloupe, and honeydew melon all in a row. And then I'd tell them in a squeeze bottle, there's ice cream substitute, which is yogurt. But I'm not telling them it's yogurt. I'm not lying to them. I'm just telling them it's ice cream substitute. Tastes like ice cream, but it's not ice cream. So I'd have them put each one of those fruits into a bowl and then top it and make it look really nice with a squeeze bottle. And then they would use a garnish. I teach these kids about garnishes. Every one of these kids, if you ask them what's a garnish, they'll say a garnish is what makes food look good. And then you can ask them, well, why do we want to make food look good? And they'll say, well, because then people will eat it, right? So every one of these kids know that. And so then they top it with a garnish, usually blueberries and sliced strawberries. And these plates look beautiful. But what I found with these kids is they eat up all the fruit. They love it. I mean, they always ask for seconds, and I'm always like, well, I got to make sure all the kids go through first so you can, but these kids will eat all the fruit if it's cut up. So then I start thinking to myself, well, how many of these, kids, their parents, even know how to cut up a pineapple, know how to cut up a cantaloupe, or, and if they do, how quickly could they get it cut up? Because we don't want to spend a lot of time in the kitchen. I know how it is. We have busy lives. You have to work, 40 hours a week, then you got to travel, and then you get home, and then you got to cook, and then you got to clean. And, it's already been an early morning getting the kids up and getting them to school. So it gets to be a long day. But, it excites me when I see these kids wanting to eat zucchini and squash and kale and fresh herbs and fresh lemon juice. I went to present at the Kickapoo Nation School up there, and I did this saute. And they got to saute. I set it all up. You start with the bell pepper, then you put a zucchini, then you put a squash, then you put some fresh garlic, then you put some fresh cut up kale, and then you put some fresh lemon juice, and then you toss it all together and you put it on a plate, and then you top it with some grilled chicken. These junior high and high school kids, they were eating that up. And one of them even asked me, they said, Jason, do you think you can come and work for us here and cook for us? And I said, I would like to, but I kind of have my own business going. I would love to come and work here, but unfortunately, and a few of them even said, you know what, if we had this for lunch today, I would have ate it all. And I was blown away with that. So inspired that these kids said that. And it just makes me want to reach out to all these communities, just, so that I can come in and set it up for them. And again, I told you, it goes back, in my opinion, it goes back to using the knife. We have to, in my opinion, we have to teach all these communities how to learn a knife, because we can give them all the recipes you want, right? We can tell them this is a great place to get a recipe. I'm going to share with you a few recipes that are good for diabetics, good for high cholesterol. But if they don't really know how to use a knife, or if they don't even have like a chef knife, if you're using a paring knife, trying to cut up, vegetables for a stew, it's going to take you 20 minutes just to cut up the celery, carrots, and onion with a paring knife. And then that, that's not even all of it. So there's a process with cooking. And if some of these communities, some of these people are spending too much time in the kitchen with the prep part, they're not going to have a good experience, because then they're going to spend too much time cutting it, prepping it, cooking it. Then they got to clean. And then by then, they ate a healthy meal, but how much time did they invest? And how many times do you think they want to invest that time doing that? Maybe some of them will. But what I do with my business is I teach them to have dishwater going, ready to go, so that when you're done with something, wash it, rinse it, because more than likely you might use it again when you're cooking, type of thing. Just simple, things around the kitchen that you can cut down the time that you spend in the kitchen, type of thing. But I'm just excited to see these kids eating this fresh fruit. I wish I could be there every day. I'd cut fresh fruit every day, and I'd sit back so happy seeing these kids eating fresh fruit.
I know that Mitchell has an important question. I can pull it back up quick enough about providing options or opportunities. Mitchell, do you want to unmute yourself and clarify your question about grants and funding opportunities for tribes to be connected?
Yeah, so often I see these grant opportunities or funding requests come on. They say they're eligible for tribes and communities to apply for, but I don't hear about how to get in connection with them and to get these services provided and grant writing for them so that these services that are much needed in the communities can be delivered. As we know, the tribes are often forgotten, and I feel like it's nice that they're included, but how can we make them actively aware that they are included? Is there like a listserv or something that maybe just my ignorance of being outside of the tribes because of my family's connection is a few times removed, I suppose. I think it's my great grandmother who was 100% Blackfoot, but it's just finding out how we can get in connection to serve these communities that desperately need it.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the listserv about that, but I know that me and Allison talked yesterday about the process that goes into writing for some of these grants is just incredibly tough. I've even looked at trying to start a nonprofit so that I could try to take cutting boards and knives and just go hit the road to all these, places and teach culinary arts just with the knife. But I don't know if I can spend however long it takes to fill out 70 to 80 pages of a grant, so yeah, Allison brought that up yesterday where a lot of these Native communities, they just don't have the personnel to apply for those grants and write them up. And I don't even know if I could. So I think making those grants more accessible to apply for, maybe easier, just specifically for these Native communities would help. I think would be beneficial. But yeah, a lot of these communities have access to these grants and everything, and they just they're not applying for them and not utilizing them. And that'd be a great opportunity to try to look at how can we make them more accessible.
Yeah, I appreciate what you named there. I mean, I'm a certified peer specialist, and our organization is a nonprofit organization, 501c5, and that does make it difficult. A lot of times they want 501c3 specifically, but at the same token, they want that collusion with other organizations. It's not just a tribe or it's not just a county, it's another organization, and then they need to have like a mental health entity involved as well. So you need to have 3 or 4 different organizations invested in this process. And just like what you mentioned about getting knives and being able to teach culinary arts, we could do that under like a prevention and violence and go to areas and communities that have that there's grant funding like right now through SAMHSA for Project Aware. And maybe there's a project that we could do where we go into these, teaching kids to, instead of to stab, to slice, however your kids broken down, that we can, teach them, readily accessible meals and catharsis ways to deal with stress instead of violence, and you do it
Yeah.
under that way. But, there's several opportunities. It's just, how can we get in connection together so that we can collaborate on these efforts? I mean, like you mentioned, there's not a listserv. So is there like a list of tribal nations that would be eligible to apply for something like that, that an organization could get in contact with? And if there isn't, can we develop one?
This is a great question. I don't know, Mitchell, where you're located, but
I'm in Delavan, Wisconsin,
not too far.
Peoria.
Okay, a few weeks ago, we had Derek Nicholas on with us as a presenter. I don't know if you were in that session with him. It was about 3 weeks ago. And he's a chef up here in the Minnesota area. And one of the things that he spoke of was accessibility to fresh fruits, even though he helps with the community gardens and really helps educate children and their families on healthy eating. Still, there are some limitations to what they have access to, because up here in Minnesota, the week before Easter, we still had 3 feet of snow at my home. So it's like, how do you create a year-long garden? And so a part of his mentality and expertise is talking about how do we provide and eat seasonally with every season, and what do we look for, what we can grow and forage and prepare and hunt and eat in that capacity. But one of the things that he noticed where he's at in Minnesota is that, again, accessibility was an issue. So in his community, he was able to procure the SNAP program, which a lot of people have access to because of the ways that we are living in poverty in many of our communities. But that Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, is available and accessible. It wasn't at the time that he was thinking about it, but he went and had to do paperwork, had to follow the policies, had to go through all the protocol to provide that. And it meant that he had to do the extra work. And so he is the SNAP director. He actually started it during COVID because, you know, across the country, everybody was really struggling financially, was really struggling with accessibility. Add to that our tribal communities with even more barriers. So that's a program that he initiated and has kept going. One of the things that I'm going to share towards the end of our session is we're putting together a toolkit at our center to go along with this series of sessions, because we've had such great experts, in addition to Jason, who are out there in the community, you know, boots on the ground, working with tribal communities consistently in remote and urban areas. And a lot of the resources that they've shared with us, not necessarily recipes, we're going to include those because those are important too, but resources for where to buy these foods, how to gain access to these foods. Once you have them, how do you cook them? How do you grow them? All those kinds of things are being put together in this toolkit that we're going to provide for you all. I don't have a listserv off the top of my head of what we can do as far as that goes, but I really believe our communities are so relational. We are so collectivistic as a community that we like to support one another. And so a part of that toolkit is I'm listing resources where we may not have the answers right here where I'm at in Minnesota. I do know they're around here somewhere because Derek lives here. But there are other larger communities that have been doing things like Navajo Nation. They could lend their process of how they provide that service to their communities. Where did they begin? How did they do it? What do we need to get started in that process? Whether you're a 501c3 or 501 or 505, is that what you said, Mitchell?
Yeah, C5, labor organization.
So it's really important that, yes, we have to unfortunately play by the rules, but when you learn what those rules are and how to use them to your benefit and find people who can support you, and that is really important. I know that I'm going to include that in our toolkit that'll be provided to everybody that participates, if that's helpful, Mitchell.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. You're welcome. Jason, we have another few questions here. A clearinghouse for Native needs. Okay.
I saw the one for the social media one. Thank you, Mary Ann.
Do you want to answer that? Okay.
Yeah, I'm writing that in. There we go. Yeah, I wish, you know, I feel so alone sometimes, like I'm just a one-person business, and you know, I miss working with a group of people, and that's why I love doing these with you guys, because I don't feel so alone anymore. But you know, I'm just one person trying to make a difference. I see what's going on, and I think to myself, what can I provide? You know, I can provide inspiration and motivation, and I can provide the knife cutting skills, because I'm just a big believer that that's a huge part. That's a huge part with everything, with cooking and health and wellness and well-being and mental health is what we eat. Food is medicine, but we have to eat the right foods. And but I'm so happy to collaborate with everybody. You know, I used to go to conferences a lot, and people would always say, we need to do something. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, I'd love to work with you and go talk to them, but then I never hear from them. And then the next year, same thing. We need to do something. We need to all come together. And I go, well, I'm right here. I'm ready. And, you know, so I kind of just went on my own and just kind of like, well, I'm going to try my best here with what I can do. But yeah, it's just nice that there's so many of us that want to make a difference in these communities. you know, because they need us. They really need us. Our kids need us, our elders need us. And, you know, we can make a huge impact if we all work together.
So true, Jason. And I know Mitchell, I want to address one more thing is that we have our indigenous ways of knowing. We have our own knowledge to draw from because it's a part of our ancestry. It's a part of who we are. And if we can come together, whether we're in our own small community or share amongst our regional area, I know that it's really important to support each other in this process. Another one of our presenters, Hope Flanagan, she's a master gardener, community gardener. She goes around the country showing people how to start their gardens in their area, how to prepare the soil, how to get ready, and what is native to your area. How do you know what is healthy, what is poisonous? She's very good about that. And it's really an important part of the education, because we know, as Jason shared at the very beginning of our time together, it's like this has been something we've done for years, where we've actually hunted and foraged for our foods. We didn't go down to the local grocery store, whatever it is in your area, and go pick things off the shelf. We went out into our community and looked for foods to eat, or hunted for foods to eat. And so it's really important to find experts like her. All of the people who presented in our 5-part series are going to be mentioned again in this toolkit so that you can reach out to them. I'm going to provide Jason's information here besides his Facebook that he shared with you all. I'm going to share his business information, because these are conversations that you can continue to have. And I give you a good example. I'm up here in Minnesota in a non-native community called Bemidji, but I'm surrounded by tribal communities. And at the local gym where I go work out in the morning with my husband, there's a young man who's a prevention specialist at one of the tribes. And he told me just recently, a few weeks ago, he says, I was given some property as a prevention specialist to start a garden, and I don't even know where to begin. I said, come to one of our sessions, learn from Hope Flanagan, the community gardener, and she will share with you. She may even come out to you and help you work with your property that you were given by the tribal community. And so he's really excited now that he has this option to learn from somebody, because he's a prevention specialist. He knows what he needs to do from a textbook, but to go out and actually work the property and learn how to make it viable to grow things for Leech Lake, he's looking forward to that. And so Mitchell, again, I'm going to provide all of these experts, Jason's information, Hope's information, everybody who's presented in this series, so that you all can connect with them and continue the conversation, so that we can pull our resources together, network together to provide quality information from our ancestral knowledge. I see a few more things in the chat that I'm going to try and open up and address. Unless Jason, you can read them quicker than I.
Yeah, I'm kind of taking a look at them. The garden thing's great. Drug
Thank you.
dealing, and yeah, how to grow and then sell at farmers markets. That's great. Gardening is which I wish I was stronger at it. You know, being a chef, every year I've owned this house for 5 years now, and every year I keep telling myself I'm going to have the best garden in Eudora, and never get around to putting the time in. But that's something I want to get really great at, is growing my own stuff. You know, I have a nice spot outside to do it. So.
Well, I would like to open up the floor for anybody who has suggestions, because I see that some of you put some great ideas here. Before I share my resources on the screen, I see that Arlene gave us a suggestion from Caleb Warnock on gardening, which might be a good resource for people who want to garden in the winter, which we know can be a challenge. But if anybody else has resources to share at this time, I want to invite you to do so. Thank you, Janet. I see you sent me another resource to include for low-cost farming. I'll include that in our resource book provided by the USDA. Any suggestions or opportunities that you'd like to talk about before I go on to a few slides? Thank you, Mitchell. I do want to share that last week I had the privilege of being a part of the Tribal Public Health Conference out in Oklahoma, and I see some folks on the line from Oklahoma. So thank you for hosting us last week out in Durant. Every day after our keynote speaker, we had a native chef featured cooking and providing a meal for people to taste if they wanted to after they were done. And I know that Jason was actually featured in that series a few years back. At the end of the conference, they gave us this really nice cookbook. I have asked for a digital version of it so that I can include that in our toolkit, because that also includes Jason in the cookbook. So it's really important to look to our native experts. I find it very important. I started this as a part of our conversation today, that we know that there's Western-based science that has evidence-based methods and applications, and it's valid. It's wonderful. But when we look at our own traditional knowledge, it is so key that we look at our own practice-based evidence. What has worked for our communities for years? What has sustained us? What has kept us healthy? And so I want us to keep that at the forefront of our conversation, because this series is titled Native Nutrition. And somebody asked in the chat, are we going to present this series again? I haven't decided to present this exact series, but we are looking at offering something again similar in the summertime. I see a lot of great comments here coming in. Before I show any slides, I want to address them if I need to. I see some of you put some resources for me. The Village ECP, peer support, and low-cost farming. Okay, thank you. I'll look into all of those great resources. Thank you for sharing those. I know it's important to know what to do, where to do these kinds of activities and programs, and provide for our communities in need. And I want to say thank you for those of you who've joined us, whether this is your first session or you were actually a part of it from the get-go when we started a few months back. Can everybody see my slide?
Yep.
Does it say recommendations for healthy eating?
Yep.
Very good. Thank y'all. So moving forward, we do want to keep this conversation going. For the person who did ask, are we going to do this again? We'll do it in another form or fashion very similar to this, because it is so key in the field of prevention science to look at how we heal ourselves holistically. How do we heal ourselves mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically? If we can attend to all four of those areas, then we're going to be on a healthier path. If we negate, if we leave out, if we omit one part of that, then we may struggle in our journey. And so providing this opportunity for native nutrition for prevention and healing is so important to our center. We know that traditionally, and I say tradition with a small t, many times when we think of prevention, we think of working with substance use disorders. And that is an important part of our journey. Remember the colonization image that I shared with you at the very beginning. We have several issues in our history that weren't a part of who we were to begin with. It is because of colonization that we have so many issues in our lives. So how we heal, we look to our inner knowledge, our indigenous ways of knowing. And so several of the recommendations that we're going to be providing for you all in this toolkit are foods to buy. And I know Jason did a great demo a couple of weeks ago where he cooked something for us live and in living color on the screen, and talked about some simple ways that we can change our plate and really look at it from the visual perspective to engage and entice people to want to eat what's on our plates, especially children. We're also going to include where you can buy or gain access to foods affordably, low cost, to address some of Mitchell's concerns. So we are going to include that in the toolkit, Mitchell, and for everybody else who has that interest. We're going to talk about how to cook some of these foods, because that is so important. We don't always want to eat a cold meal. It'd be nice to be able to gather in the kitchen as a family or with one or two other family members and start to learn how to cook things. I know that's one of my favorite things to do when I go back home to Texas with our grandchildren. My two grandsons love hanging out in the kitchen. It's usually to bake. because we do a lot of baking. But cooking is really important to them, to where now my 12-year-old grandson loves cooking breakfast for everybody. It's something he learned the last few years, and now he feels confident that he can get there on the grill, cook something for everybody to eat and enjoy. And then we also want to talk about how to grow our foods. Can't grow everything, but what little we can learn will help benefit our communities. So we want to think about those important ways that we are changing the mindset of going back to our tradition. We also are going to provide a wealth of resources for you all for healthy eating. Some simple things that I just want to share with you for today, and these will be included in the toolkit plus other ideas, to look for ways that produce boxes are provided by tribal organizations. I mentioned Navajo Nation because I used to live and work there for many years with my family. I taught at the tribal college, and I know the Navajo Nation Co-op and the other farming organizations gather together to help families get monthly boxes, bi-weekly boxes, weekly boxes of fresh produce. To teach families how to grow their own produce was really important there also. So I'm going to talk about that in the document. We're also going to give you information of how to connect with community or school gardeners, because those are important ways to teach our children. I think I was like in first or second grade when I was taught how to grow something for the first time, taking the traditional milk carton, planting a bean seed and showing it grow for a couple of weeks was fascinating. And to continue to do that with children today is important, to show them how they can be responsible, care for something, and help it grow, to provide something for them. Providing healthy cooking classes is important. Jason has a lot of great demos that you can find online. Derek has some cooking demos. There are a lot of wonderful Native chefs out there who can provide this information at the click of a button on YouTube or other stations online. So we want to make sure that you have access to those. 2 nationwide resources that I'd like to share with you all are here in the middle of the screen. Native American Nutrition. It's actually sponsored by the University of Minnesota, which I think is Jason's alma mater, right? Mm-hmm. They have a conference they hold every either August or September, and the whole focus is on Native nutrition. So if you go to that website, you'll have access to the upcoming conference. They have a lot of resources on their homepage to refer to. We Are Native, based out of the Oregon area with the Portland Indian Health Board area, has some great articles on food as medicine, because we know that when we change our diets, it changes our health. Jason gave us a great testimony at the beginning of our session today, where he spoke to that very thing, changing what he took into his body, taking off the negative aspects of what he put into his body and having healthy results. Positive, healthy results is important. I put our center last because we have several resources already online, and we'll continue to provide resources for you. If you go to our Prevention Technology Transfer Center network page, our landing page, you will be able to see, probably in another week or so, all 5 sessions for this series, Native Nutrition for Prevention and Healing. They're being uploaded probably by next week. All 5 will be uploaded on our website, so you can go back and review them. And any resources that the presenters shared with us will also be provided. In addition to that, we did a series last summer called Native Food is Medicine. And it's also on our prevention landing page. But our center, the Native Center for Behavioral Health, has a YouTube channel going back about 8 or 9 years. And it has a wealth of knowledge for mental health, trauma, addiction, as well as prevention. And so you can go to our YouTube channel and see a lot of sessions. You can also go to our landing page and find the Native Food is Medicine series on our website. If you're a participant in this series, please know you will be emailed the toolkit that we're finalizing to send out to everybody who participated. So if you came to any one of our 5 sessions, you will be given this document. You will be included in the email for those who receive it. Eventually, it will be posted also on our website. Any questions about these resources or things that I shared? You're welcome to unmute yourself, or if you posted something in the chat, I'd like to try and see. Yes, I see a couple of good things that people are posting about pharmacy. Yes, Cheryl, thank you for providing fruit and veggies to your grandchildren. It's wonderful. Yes, cooking and baking, Mitchell, require some important skills. Learning how to set the temperature is really important. I agree. And I always tell my grandsons, baking is a science. If you mismeasure what you're putting into this recipe, it's not going to come out the way you think, the way you expect. Because at our home, we don't use boxes for cakes or cookies or anything. We bake from scratch. And so somebody was asking about alternative recipes, and I want to address that briefly before I turn the floor over to Jason. Navajo Nation, when I lived there, nobody could ever provide me with a recipe of their fry bread because I wanted to see what they put in their fry bread versus what we put in ours back home. And nobody would ever share what they put, with the exception of one of my coworkers, because her fry bread was always blue. And I wanted to know, what are you doing so different? She would put blue corn, ground blue corn in her recipe to offset the flour use. And that was her way of making a healthier version of fry bread. It didn't taste the same. Obviously, it didn't look the same, but it was very tasty. It was different. And I appreciated her trying to make an alternative version for us. And I do the same thing with my baking at home. I bake a lot with almond flour when I'm trying to offset a new recipe. It doesn't rise as good as an oat flour, which I use a lot in baking because the oat flour tends to rise like a traditional cake or traditional cookie. Almond flour doesn't act the same way. So I haven't tried it in making fry bread, but I might venture to try that one day because I'm always looking for healthier ways to incorporate into what we put on our plates at home. I think it's important to teach our family and our children to do that. So I want to say thank you to everybody who's giving us ideas, giving us feedback, providing us with resources. As I share my last 2 slides with you, for those of you who are trying to connect with Jason, here is his information from his business. An email address is provided there. His website is provided, a phone number, and I think he provided his Facebook contact information.
Yeah, I got a new business card now, so I'll get that to you. It just says Native Chef LLC. Doesn't say
Okay.
Jason the Native Chef anymore.
Okay,
And
thank
it
you.
has my Facebook on there and all that.
Okay, wonderful.
I was gonna bring up, Allison, that I thought about a fry bread substitute where you actually boil the bread and then brush it with like a little bit of butter and then oven bake it like at a very high temperature. That's just like a bagel. A bagel is basically boiled, so.
So you'll
But
have to
I
try it.
haven't tried it. I haven't tried it yet. I'm just, it's in my head.
We'll have to try and see if it makes it.
Probably not, but it's worth a try, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I'm always open to trying things. I think it's important to experiment in the kitchen and learn to be healthier with what we put on our plates. Here's our last slide that I'm going to share, and then I'll leave the floor to Jason. For those of you who've stuck around with us for this session, know that our next series for prevention is going to be a look at practice-based evidence in Indigenous prevention. We need to draw from our strengths. We need to draw from our experts. And this is why I seek out knowledgeable experts like Jason to be our presenters, to come here and share traditional knowledge. to help us live healthier lives. So we have that next series beginning May 18th. It's really important that we look at our strengths from our own communities to implement with our communities. Our center website is listed at the top of the page, cph-nativecenter@uiowa.edu. If you want to check out our website and see all the other offices, centers, programs that we have that I mentioned earlier. Know that you'll be getting a follow-up email to today's session so that you'll have an opportunity to respond to our evaluation. I'll put the link one more time in the chat. You can also use the QR code that's here on the screen for you, but that really helps us understand better how we can do these presentations in the future, what you appreciated, what you learned, what you liked, and what we can do to improve upon this for the next time. We are in the midst of securing funding for the next several years for our center. So feedback from you is very helpful to our community, to our center, so we can continue to do this. We value your feedback. Know that it is anonymous, cannot be traced back to you, and it's very, very important to us. Jason, the floor is yours for these last few minutes as we get ready to say till next time.
Yeah,
Anything-
well, I appreciate everybody attending, and thank you so much, Allison, for inviting me. And I feel really good. I feel really good that, you know, I'm not the only one that's trying to think of how we can make an impact with these communities. And you know, like I said, sometimes I just feel by myself and alone, but being in more of these meetings like this, it inspires me to keep doing the good work and know that that a lot of you guys are doing all good work. And you know, we really need to try to do something, especially for our kids, these Native American kids, you know, diabetes at younger ages and obesity at younger ages. And you know, I think we owe it to them to try to, you know, make as big of an impact as we can for their future and for Native American people's future. And I'm going to keep doing what I do, one event at a time, try to help people one person at a time, and just keep up doing the great work, guys. And thank you so much, Allison, for having me again. I sure appreciate it. And that's all I have to say. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everybody. Till next time.